Hello, everybody. Welcome once again to Dogs and Baskets, a podcast about ideologies. And I'm very honored and privileged today to welcome Bart Ehrman onto the show. This is going to be really, I've been looking forward to this. I first came across Bart almost 10 years ago on a History Channel, something maybe about Judas or something, and he was in it for a total of 10 seconds, I think, in 5 separate clips. And they clearly were doing some editorializing and some bias. And I'd reached out then, and we've been in corresponding ever since, and I'm very much looking forward to this. I consider Bart to be a national treasure. He's got a very unique background. He was raised in Lawrence, Kansas, in Episcopalian household. Just your standard middle America family. At the age of actually 50 years ago, I think this year, he chose between being a second baseman for his baseball team or pursuing a life of evangelical Christianity, and has been regretting it ever since. I don't know if that's true or not. I'm just bullshitting here. So then Bart went off, he became a born again Christian, went off to Moody Bible College in Chicago, then went to Wheaton, where Billy Graham went, and Franklin Graham lives about a mile as the crow flies that way. I live up in Boone, North Carolina, in the epicenter of the Bible Belt. And then he went on to Princeton Theological College for his PhD. And in the process, over these years, he learned ancient Greek and ancient Latin and other language, and began studying all the different transcripts, getting his hands on any transcript he could get his hands on to try to understand as much as he could. He had an insatiable thirst for all things Christianity, and he started to stumble across discrepancies and contradictions and things that he couldn't reconcile, but he seemed to be okay with all that, because it was more about the faith than it was, this verse versus that verse. And along the ways, he taught for a year, I believe, at Rutgers. And there, I believe, he happened to stumble across teaching a course on reconciling human suffering and the Bible. And it was there where he kind of hit the wall, and with his inability to reconcile those two things. And that experience basically changed the course of history. And so what Bart has done over the last 25 or 30 years is written many, many books on the first few centuries of Christianity, the discrepancies in the Bible. And along the way, he's become an atheist. So this is a very interesting, unique perspective. It gives us a lot of objectivity that we normally don't get from Christian apologists who tend to use their ideology to defend their ideology. And so Bart really gives us a very unique perspective on the early text and the early formation, the proto-orthodoxy of Christianity. How'd I do?
Great. Yeah, good. You almost got it.
Shortstop?
No, it was second base.
And, I nailed it.
You got that part right. But yeah, that wasn't the decision. The deal was that I actually was, it was my junior year in high school, and I, in the middle of the season, I got hepatitis, and I had to stop playing baseball. And it was just as well. I was in a hitting slump. but since I had nothing to do, I started getting interested in academics. So I could just sit around the house. I thought I better read some books, and made me what I am today. Hepatitis.
Yeah. Speaking of sports, we got to catch up on a little NCAA basketball. Wondered how my Boilermakers did yesterday.
Oh my God! Don't even go there. No, they're fantastic. They're fantastic. What? Well, shut up. They're fantastic. They're really they should be a national contender. Oh my God, 7'4". Are you kidding me? And the guy can shoot. And then what's his name? Edie. And then what's his name? Ivy. So the God. It's very athletic.
They're averaging 93 points a game in college ball.
They're bona fide good, but there are a lot of good teams in the country, and I think we're going to be growing more. I think by the end of we got to be by 10 points, and so I think we're going to grow. So we'll see. I think we're good enough to be in the Sweet 16. I don't know that we'll go much farther than that, but it's possible. We've won the national championship with the worst teams than we've got now.
And Purdue typically gets to the Elite Eight or something, and then fails and they choke, and we'll
Yeah.
see how they do this year.
Nice.
By any chance, do you happen to know anything about ultimate frisbee?
Ultimate, nothing other than people play it.
So I cut my teeth on ideologies, on being a heretic within an ideological structure. So I wouldn't be here right now doing this if it hadn't been for me kind of beating my head against the wall for 40 years within an ideology that I never understood as an ideology or what the ideology was. And so it's taught me an awful lot about the frustrations. And of course, you've witnessed firsthand, I'm not so much interested in your experience so much as what you've witnessed and your observations on how someone like you're not the only one, but someone like you who's bucking the establishment, to put it mildly, with your material, how work might be suppressed or distorted or marginalized or that kind of things, just because that's how ideologues operate.
Yeah, well, my view is that we're all ideologues, and we just, most of us don't know what our ideology is, and most of us assume our ideology is common sense, and that's a dangerous view, because if you don't recognize what your own ideological biases are, then you think that somebody else is just being an idiot because they don't share them. But it becomes a particular problem in my field of research because I'm a scholar of early Christianity, and most scholars of early Christianity are committed Christians, and they see truth in ways that are different from the way I see truth. And the kind of weird thing is that conservative evangelicals and fundamentalists are strangely more children of the Enlightenment than most academics in universities, because
that makes complete sense to me.
They believe in objectivity. They think that you can prove things, and that you can prove that Jesus is raised from the dead. So boom, 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 boom. Prove the Bible has no mistakes in it. Boom, boom, boom. And when the rest of the world kind of moved into postmodernism, they're saying, "Oh my God, no, it is like objective truth, and we've got it, and you're going to hell because you don't." So, okay.
Well, we're going to get back to this later, but but this kind of, and it's interesting how and I'm going to go way off the rails here, that there's a contradiction, there's a hypocrisy in their using objectivity and in a spiritual context. And we can get to what is and isn't spiritual, but I just find it interesting that their ideology isn't even what they think it is. And
it's weird because they of course they have no idea about this, because they think that Christianity has always been about objective truth. The New Testament's all about proving the resurrection, and it's completely false. Until the Enlightenment, there were no Christians who had any idea at all about this kind of thing, this kind of, that you don't prove faith. I mean, if you don't believe, you might go to hell, but it's not because you haven't listened to the proof. But it's become, for these Christian apologists, it's become a kind of that you can demonstrate propositions as historical fact, and that faith means accepting the historical facts. And throughout the history of Christianity, within the Christian tradition, that was just nonsense. But they don't see it that way. Obviously, they have their own ways of doing things.
Now, I mentioned this to you in email, and people always say the same thing you do. I don't think I'm ideological, and if you are, no, hold on, bear with me. I'm not finished. When I say something ideological, point it out. But more importantly than that, it seems. So I certainly aspire to be non-ideological. I think that's a good, that's a good aspiration. But what I see as dangerous is that some ideologies at the end of the spectrum are really more ideological, or the more people within an ideological construct or something. And so it's kind of dangerous saying, well, everybody's ideological, so I might as well be, X, Y, Z.
Oh, yeah, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that move. But I think I don't think it's possible to be a thinking human being without having ideologies. I don't even know what that would mean.
Well, I understand. Let's move forward, and then, because hopefully I'll make sense out of that going forward. Because
listen, I've had this conversation with 1,000 people. And so so maybe you told me something I haven't heard before. But I'm just telling you, if you try not to have an ideology, it's because you've got an ideological slant for not having an ideology. And almost always, this is an enlightenment project, and it's almost always been in order.
What's an enlightenment project? Sorry.
To try not to have an ideology.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Well, of course, that's what objectivity is. Objectivity means you're not subjective. You don't have a bias in this. You don't have any prejudices. You're just looking for the truth. But that's always been a rhetorical strategy. It's never been a reality. Nobody's without ideologies, and people who say they're without ideologies are the ones who are trying to use rhetoric in order to establish the objectivity of their truth.
Okay, all right. Let's.
In my opinion, as somebody who's a philosopher.
Okay. I have three. There's probably more than this, but I got 3 laws of ideologies. Ideologies are always divisive. It's always separating people who are part of that ideology and those who aren't. Ideologies tend to be equal and opposite ideologies. So you've got the Inquisition, and then you got postmodern science, or what I call postmodern science, which has nothing to do with postmodernism, and that ideologies. Anytime, anywhere in society where we have organizational ideologies, we're guaranteed to have institutionalized bigotry every time. Bigotry being the lack of tolerance for non-like-minded thinking. As a matter of fact, just a few weeks ago in September, you closed a talk you gave about the triumph of Christianity over the Roman Empire. And you said something really beautiful at the end that I want to try to get you to and to get you to expound on, which was that without Christianity, we wouldn't have had Bach and Michelangelo, or you know what I'm referring to, but then at the same time, we did lose some culture and some art and some drama, and the unintended consequences of Christianity triumphing was the state that we're in now to this day of complete lack of tolerance and that you can't even have conversations these days with people who, as soon as you find out they think differently than you can't even talk to them. So can you talk about that for a bit?
Yeah, no, it's for me, I wrote this book called The Triumph of Christianity, and it made me think a lot about how the world changed when Christianity became the dominant. It wasn't just the dominant religion. Throughout the Middle Ages, it was the dominant cultural, social, economic, political force. I mean, it was like Christianity was the power statement, really, and it was implemented on all sorts of levels. And I got interested in what it had replaced, because it's interesting on all sorts of levels. It would take us more than 2 hours just to talk about this one little thing, but the thing that surprised me was, not surprised me, the thing that took me back a little bit is recognizing that in the Roman world, when it came to religion, so just now sticking with the religion aspect of things, within the religious world, in the Roman world, religions were completely tolerant. So if you worship Zeus and I worship Apollo, who cares? I mean, they're both gods. They're both, and so we worship whoever we worship, and the way we want to worship. And there's no competition. Like if I worship Athena and you worship Ares, it's not like I'm trying to convert you to worship my God. It's like, why? They're all gods and they all deserve to be worshipped. But Christianity came along, and it was the only thing that said, no, look, we've got the truth, and if you don't agree with us, you're wrong. And not only are you wrong, but you're going to hell. And there were no religions like that. I mean, Judaism wasn't even like that. And so Christianity came in with this intolerance theory. And the problem was not just the religion, but then it became the entire ideology of rightness. And so that's and what does that lead to? Well, politically and socially and culturally, it doesn't lead it can lead to good things. Obviously, I mean, we wouldn't, as you said, we wouldn't have Mozart or Bach or whatever. I mean, it's like, or Leonardo or like whatever. But there are fantastic cultural results of Christianity taking over. But one of the downsides is this idea that that there's ultimate truth, and that if you don't have mine, then you're going to go to hell. And that gets implemented in political policy.
Well, right now it's spread out into our culture, our politics, our sense of ethics and morality, right? When we look outside our windows, we see the tectonic plates of ideologies mashing up against each other. All the fissures, the fault lines in society are all ideological. And and we see it. And I'm trying to figure out, maybe you can say this better than I can. I don't like, it's funny because you said something about Bach and Mozart, like, oh, there's an upside here, but that doesn't mean too much. Ideologies tend to, I compare them to training wheels. They they help us, they help give people a worldview to make sense of this reality, but at a time, and so they help kind of get people up and going into a place. But then that same thing that helped you get somewhere becomes sort of an oppressor, and it stagnates growth, and people get very stuck.
No, it definitely can do that. But I don't think that this Christian ideology of the Christian ideology, I guess I would say, is an ideology of intolerance for difference, but it's not that ideology replaced something that was a non-ideology. It replaced a different ideology. The different ideology was also highly problematic. I mean, it wasn't good, but that's always how it is. It's never, as I was saying earlier, I don't believe there's such a thing as a non-ideology. It's just that you've got to choose which one. You've got to have criteria for deciding what strikes you as a superior ideological view.
But before that, I think you have to understand what your ideology is, at least. Identify.
Well, so Christians don't really understand the kind of intolerance thing as being ideologically driven, but it is. And it leads, obviously it leads to huge problems. It's not the only thing that leads to problems. It's not like all wars are because of Christianity or something.
No, what if my law is correct, that ideologies tend to create equal and opposite ideologies, and that's been going on for 1700 years, and we've got all these battling ideologies, postmodern neo-Marxism versus the right in politics, which I don't know exactly what their ideology is, but it seems like society is very fractured along ideological lines, like very strongly fractured along these lines. And most people aren't aware what their ideologies are.
No, they are. But I would say, like, a lot of the far right ideology is driven by sameness, which is this kind of intolerance thing. But I mean, it's that's interesting. If people aren't like me, then they're a problem. And what we need is a country that's with everybody like me. And if somebody's not like me, then we need to get rid of them.
Yeah, we can spend days on that. So now back to you, and it's been what, almost 30 years since you published your first book. Next year's an anniversary, something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Actually, my first book was published, I think, in maybe 88 or something.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, right, when you get to Chapel Hill.
It wasn't what you heard. It's like,
oh, okay.
My first book was called Didymus the Blind and the Text of the Gospels. It wasn't a bestseller.
Okay, I'm with you. I'm talking about the this
like a trade book. My first one, the first trade book I wrote, which, like, for a general audience, was in 1999.
Okay.
Called Jesus, Apocalyptic Prophet of the New Millennium.
So the question I want to ask or have you talk about is, I think you and I both think there's a tremendous amount of wisdom in the Bible. There's some beautiful stories. There are really some great parables. Frankly, prodigal son is one of my I like that a lot. So it's not like you're trying to destroy anything, but your work is comprised of, on a granular level, looking at, there's more translation errors or text variations in the Bible than there's words, and picking apart all these differences and contradictions. And on the other end of the scale, you can do sort of a macro analysis and talk about how maybe a much bigger factor in that in the proto-orthodoxy and what turned out to be the Nicene Creed had more to do with when in Rome, do as the Romans do. In other words, Rome was the population center of the area, and just so coincidentally that their flavor of Christianity won out. So I guess what I want to ask you is, what's your synopsis of all your work regarding this controversy of what really happened?
I have several things I think have guided most of my work, and one of the things that's guided it is actually kind of related to what I was saying about the far right. My emphasis of early Christianity is always, not always, but since I became a scholar, my emphasis has been on diversity, the diversity of Christianity. So in the modern world, of course, Christianity is hugely diverse. You get Greek Orthodox priests, and you get Appalachian snake handlers, and you get Mormons, and you get Jehovah's Witnesses, and you get, Presbyterians, and you get Greek Orthodox, whatever. It's like, oh my God. But one of my major theses of my work is that in early Christianity is even more diverse than it is today by a large margin, and that Christianity was never a thing. It was always lots of things, different things that were at odds with each other. And that what emerged as what we think of as Christianity it didn't emerge because this is what Jesus taught his apostles. It emerged because there were conflicts and there were battles over ideas and practices and beliefs. And one side, for a variety of historical and cultural reasons, won that debate. That side decided which books would be in the New Testament, and to decide what statements of faith would be in the creed, and decide how Christians were supposed to behave in terms of their ethics. And it decided things. And even after that, after they reached these kind of consensus things, it's not like it stood still then. There's still all sorts of things going on throughout history. But my focus has been on the first 3 centuries, and especially on the New Testament. And the variety of early Christianity goes back into the New Testament itself, so that the different authors of the New Testament actually have different views about significant things that you don't notice, because when people read the New Testament, if they do, they treat it as a single book, because that's how you buy it. You buy it as a book. And, if it's between 2 covers, you just think it's all like, it's the same author, right? So you just read the whole thing. But if you actually don't do it that way, but you treat Matthew as very different from John, he's very different from Paul, who's very different from the book of Revelation, you realize, oh my God, these people are representing different views. And so that's a lot of my work, is about diversity.
Right, but I know you're not going to answer this, but what's your conclusion?
It was diverse.
Well, no. So what does that mean? There's 2 billion Christians on this planet, and it's a non-zero. There's actually a pretty good chance that what they're practicing is pretty far. And I know you can't really try to put statistical numbers on this, but it seems to me like the chances are they're practicing something that Jesus wasn't really teaching.
Oh yeah, no, I think that's completely right. There are over 2 billion Christians, and I've never met one or heard of one who actually is doing what Jesus did. And so there's probably somebody out there, but the whole religion changed right after Jesus' death, and it's never gone back. There were and there still are people who consider themselves to be Jewish Christians, who believe that the Old Testament still has to be followed in the ways that Jesus taught, and so there are people who try to be, but most Christians are not trying to practice Judaism, because they see them as separate religions. And for Jesus, they were not separate religions. But even more than that, Jesus did not think that his death and resurrection was going to bring salvation. But that's what Christianity's become. And it's like, and so it's not what he preached, which is okay with me. It's not that I'm not a back to Jesus person who says, okay, yeah, if we're going to be really, then we have to get back to Jesus. That's also an ideology. It's the ideology that the origins of something determines its meanings. And I don't believe that. And so I don't think origins are interesting. Genealogies and developments are interesting. My whole argument in this whole thing, Frank, is that I'm really opposing fundamentalist Christianity and conservative evangelical Christianity that insists that it's got the truth, it's all in the Bible's no mistakes, and if you don't agree with us, off to the pits of hell. I just think it's completely wrong, and it's wrong with respect to the Bible itself.
Right. Okay, good. That is the answer to my question. Yeah. And it's very difficult to do anything about, as much as I would like to try. So there's this guy, Irenaeus, you're a good friend of yours. He was a hereticologist. And so what would have Irenaeus's response been to your recent work? Do you think someone like that who's really the orthodox guy, making sure that nobody infiltrates us that's going to burst our bubble?
He and I stand at odds at a lot of things. I really, he was a very impressive thinker.
He's a second century scholar or priest.
He was writing around 180, 185. And we have a 5-volume work from him. That's in English, it's translated Against Heresies. That's used the title, Against Heresies. And what he does is he tries to isolate these various groups of Gnostics and Jewish Christians and Marcionite Christians. He names them, and there are 100 of them, or 1,000. They're all over the place. And what he tries to do is to explain what it is they think, and then to show why they're ridiculous. And that his view is that his understanding the faith has always been the understanding the faith. It's the way what Jesus thought, what Paul thought, what the early authors thought, and that people came along and perverted it because they had corrupt motives, or they're inspired by the devil, or they're just inherently evil, and they changed aspects of Christianity to come up with things, with views that Irenaeus considers crazy, and he says that, and so his 5 volumes is explaining all these things and shooting them down. My view is and that view, by the way, that view held on. That was the standard Christian view for centuries and centuries up until the early 20th century. Almost everybody had that view until 1934. There's a German scholar named Walter Bauer, who is one of my heroes, who showed, in fact, that's not right, that what Irenaeus and others are attacking as being secondary corruptions of the faith in many parts of the Christian world, they were the original faith. And that the old, like if you go to Alexandria, Egypt, the first kind of Christianity is this. It's not all what Irenaeus said. You go to Syria, and it was that. It's not all what Irenaeus said. You go to Asia Minor, it's that. It's like, and Bauer just showed that in different regions, what was original Christianity is quite different from what Irenaeus thought. And Bauer was a huge influence on my thinking, actually. But so Bauer was taking on people like Irenaeus and Eusebius, and I think Bauer was right about it.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, Irenaeus. How much damage did a relatively few number of people cause in terms of regulating orthodoxy? What isn't it? That's a rhetorical question. I got a couple small, brief questions about. We have a big anniversary coming up here in 3 years. 1700 years ago, there was this little shindig down in Nicaea, and it's very one of the most misunderstood and disunderstood things. And I don't want to get into Dan Brown or all the different distortions of the truth or whatever. One of them is there was the main bone of contention was between Arius and Alexander. And my question to you is, do you think that the outcome of that vote
altered substantially what actually ended up in the Nicene Creed.
Yeah, that much is right. So, I mean, look, a lot of the people listening to this probably won't know what this is all about. Because, look, I mean, reality, we may not want to talk about Dan Brown, but you know, more people have read him than have read the Nicene Creed. so, but Brown's argument is one that people tend to think, which is that, so the Council of Nicaea was in the year 325, as you're pointing out. It was a council called by the Emperor Constantine about 13 years after he became a Christian himself. He converted, became a Christian, and I think he was genuinely a Christian. I'm sure he was. I am sure he's genuinely.
This is a controversy. Some people think there's a question. Oh, did he really convert or was he faking it? But you're convinced he was.
Yeah, the question arose in the 19th century, and so I have it in one of my books. I talk about this at length, and there's pretty good evidence Constantine really was a Christian, even though he's a bit ignorant and a bit heavy-handed and stuff. But so Constantine's problem was that in addition to being really being a Christian, he had hoped that Christianity would help unify his empire culturally, because it was terribly fragmented. And it, before Constantine came along, the empire was a mess for a very long time. And there were divisions, there were separated states, there were civil wars, there's all sorts of stuff going on. So Constantine had hoped that he could bring some kind of cultural unity, but the problem was that Christianity was split. It was split over a theological issue that Constantine himself thought was really pretty minor. It's like, he thinks this is like, oh my God, are you kidding? This is what you're arguing about? And it was this debate between Arius and Alexander. And so according to Dan Brown, okay, I got to say it though. According to Dan Brown, the reason the Council of Nicaea was called was so that they could decide whether Jesus was the Son of God or not. And that's completely wrong, even though so many people think that that's what it was about. It's wrong. There were over 300 bishops, leaders of churches at this conference. Every one of them agreed that Jesus was the Son of God. And more than that, every one of them agreed that Jesus was God. The problem was, what did it mean to say he was God? And so the split was, you've got this guy named Arius, who's this very popular teacher. He's kind of a populist. He's got a lot of followers, and he says the way Jesus is God and God is God, but we have only one God. The way it works is that God the Father existed in eternity. God the Father is forever. But at some point, he begot this secondary divinity, Christ, who is like far more powerful than anything else in the universe. I mean, but in fact, Christ created the universe. And then, and so Christ is like unbelievably powerful, but he's not as powerful as God the Father. I mean, and so then Christ created the world. He eventually came down, died for the sins of the world, was taken back to heaven, and he and God are the two things going on with the Spirit. But so he's not equal to God. I mean, so Alexander, his bishop, thought that this was a real heresy. He argued that in fact, Christ and God both go all the way back. Christ never came into existence. He always had existed. And he's not like a secondary divinity. He's not like under God. They are completely equal. They are made of the same substance. They're the same, but they're distinct. But they're equal. So they're not identical, but they're equal, and for eternity past. So that was the debate. And Constantine, we have a writing from Constantine says, look, Alexander Arius, work it out. It's such a trivial matter. Are you kidding me? This is what you're arguing? Just work it out. They couldn't work it out. And so he calls this council, and contrary to a lot of people think, it was not a closed vote. It wasn't like they argued things back and forth for a very long time, and they took a vote, and just about everybody went with Alexander. And that's where the Nicene Creed came from. They thought that.
How significantly different did the creed come out? It had Arius had prevailed.
Well, so the creed, when there are a lot of people still in churches that say the Nicene Creed, and the Roman Catholic Church, we said it in my Episcopal church when I was growing up, and churches that say creeds often will say the Nicene Creed and don't realize that every statement actually means something. Because you can kind of rattle through it, you don't really think what it means. But like, if you start thinking about it, why do you say that? So it starts by saying, we believe in one God. why would you say you believe in one God? Like, what option do you got, really? You know, you're not going to believe in 28 gods. You're a Christian. Well, they have to say one God because they're arguing against these various groups that say there's more than one God. So we believe in one God. So you believe in the Father Almighty, and then it describes, and then you believe in Jesus Christ, his Son. But then it goes on to say, who is God of God, light from God, very God from very God, begotten, not made. What's that all about? Well, he didn't come into existence at any point. He'd always been the Son of God. So he and the Father are related to each other like a son to a father, but it's not, that's their function. It's not their essence. Their essence is they are equal. But God the Father has some things to do. God the Son has got some things to do. The Spirit's got some things to do. And so this creed is laying all this out. And this would not be what Arius would say.
It would be similar. They would have just tweaked each one of those to make it a hierarchy, correct?
Yeah, I mean, in our thinking, that's a trivial matter, and in Constantine's thinking, it's a trivial matter, and most people never understand really what the big deal is. But it was a huge matter for these theologians, because
here's my question.
Okay.
What I'm trying to get at here, I call it the Nicene ideology, because that's what it is. And so the question basically is the Christian, and we have 73 different sects of Christianity right now, or some huge number.
Oh, way more. We got that many Baptists.
I know most of them up here in Boone.
Right.
But the ideology, by and large, would basically be the same now as it was if Arius had been the one that won. I mean, it would be not entirely, but for the most part.
You wouldn't have a Trinity, for example.
Well, the Trinities come and Trinities go. I mean, the Trinity left, right? They took it out and then they added it back in.
Well, the Trinity is still the Orthodox doctrine. So I'm just saying that it would be different, and we don't know how, because it would be a hierarchical arrangement, and I don't know what the ideological consequences would be.
Right.
But you almost never have some kind of fought over doctrine that does not have lots of other consequences.
Right.
I mean, for example, well, I'm not sure what it would be, because I don't know what it would be.
It just seems, I mean, my guess is it wouldn't be that significant over the last by 1700 years, it'd be the same. So I have, want to shift gears a little bit here, and I've been struggling over the last couple of weeks since we've agreed to do this to figure out where to take this, how, and more importantly, how to take it there. And then I heard you say something that was the most pithy, the most brilliant, concise statement maybe I've ever heard. But I want you to retell the story, but you were in a group, you were at lunch with some students talking about evolution, and they were surprised at your, so can you explain tell the story?
Yeah, I assume this is the story you want to know. So it was actually, I teach these big classes at Chapel Hill. Like I used to teach these classes like 350 students or 400 students. And in a big university like this, students do not come to the office hours if your class has 400 students, because they're intimidated by you. It's like, oh my God, I can't talk to this person. So what I used to do is I used to have something that I called informal office hours at the Armadillo Grill. And so I'd say, you want to come by? Let's just come by. We'll just talk, and just talk. We'll just shoot the breeze. We'll talk about basketball, whatever you want to talk about. We'll talk, and so students would come by, and they'd be drinking and eating tacos and stuff. We talk. So this is like years ago. It's like 20 years ago. These students around the table, we were talking about something, and one of them made some comment about evolution, and it was like this negative comment. I said, well, what do you mean? And he started explaining. The other students were kind of nodding their head. I said, wait, are you saying you don't believe in evolution? And they all said, well, no, it's just a theory. I said, are you in university? What? Have you had any classes like in biology or like what? And so they said, well, look, it's a theory, and no, I've never actually learned it in school. No, like in high, they were in North Carolina high schools and stuff. It's like, oh my God. And they said, look, look, really, do you really think that we descended from apes? And I said, look, the problem isn't that I think we descended from lower forms of primates. So the problem is, I think we descended from rocks. That's the problem.
I heard that the other day. I was driving to Knoxville, long story, but as soon as I hit that, it's like, oh, fucking, that is sweet. Because I mean, what you're, I'm sure most people understand what you're describing as succinctly as possible is scientific materialism. And abiogenesis, which is a theory, a hypothesis that some 3.5 billion years ago, the right combination of lipids, self-replicating molecules, amino acids, temperature, heat, who knows what else, and poof, life happened, and that's and everything has evolved from that to this moment, unless of course there's transpermia, that this process happened on another planet and some stowaway life form came here, but it happened, right? Exactly. But yeah, people like to throw that in there. It's like, yeah, okay, but it happened somewhere. Yeah. And so
I think there are two problems, Frank. One is that. One is how does life come out of non-life? I mean, obviously, there are three problems. How does something come out of nothing? One. Two, how does life come out of non-life? Two. And three, how does consciousness come out of anything?
You nailed it. So that's exactly where we're going, buddy.
Okay, well, so look, okay, don't ask me for an answer, but I'm just saying.
I'm not.
Descending from lower form of a primate is like minor. It's a minor problem.
Well, wait till we get to I'm going to bake your noodle after we go full circle on this, and then, but so yeah, we're just a couple guys down at what'd you call it? What was the restaurant? Armadillos or something?
The Armadillo Grill. Yeah, nice.
Yeah, we're just sitting in the Armadillo Grill having some beer. Right. So I look at, I think this is just a great entry point. I look at all the different ideas and hypotheses for evolution. And from everything from creationism to intelligent design to random mutations and random selection. And when I look at everything and I do sort of a meta-analysis on everything out there, to me, the most compelling and cogent and elegant hypothesis for evolution is that reincarnation is the major driving force behind all evolutionary biology. All right.
Okay.
Okay. That just tripped the whole.
I accept that that's your view. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. No, I understand. But that statement typically hits a lot of tripwires with scientists.
Well, not just a scientist. I mean, I'm not
no doubt. Okay. What tripwire did it hit with you?
All sorts of tripwires.
We'll say it. I mean, that's what
reincarnation.
Yeah.
You got the same problem. When did it start?
Well, we're going to get there. That's not.
No, we're not going to get there, because if the universe came into being 13.5 billion years ago, there was nothing 13.6 billion years ago to get reincarnated.
That's your ideology. I
don't
share
yours. It's not an ideology, and that mine is. That's just a rhetorical device to show that you're right and I'm wrong. That is not effective.
I think I won the over and under on that. We had an over and under on the mountain up here of 17. It would be 17 minutes before you and I got contentious.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, okay. So
no. I don't.
I thought you meant on the Purdue
game. Purdue notwithstanding. Okay. Just humor me. Bear with me through this.
No, I'm completely willing to hear what you have to say. But
okay.
Yeah. But I mean, you've got
the question is what, I think the bigger question than the ones you raise is, what is life? But it's all based. Was it? Okay. And is there a God? Is there life after death? All the big questions, which is really all just one question, but in different forms. And these are the questions that, or the question, obviously seems to be the most meaningful. And but what we have right now, the tripwire I hit with the scientific community, and of course there's the Orthodox evangelical community. Of course, they just lost their minds because I said reincarnation. So there's different pockets of group, but I'm more interested in the scientific
people that the tripwire hit, which is that the filter in their minds is, well, that's not a valid scientific theory. We can't create testable predictions. We can't try to attempt to falsify your hypothesis. It's outside of where we can study scientifically. So that's pseudoscience.
Well, no, it's true. It's not a scientific theory. But
Well, according to the current ideology of science.
Well, that's what science is.
Hold on. Now we're
let me finish my statement. The fact that it's not science doesn't mean it's false. It's also, I mean, science can't decide billions of things. Science has a very limited repertoire about what it can cover. And so that's outside of its repertoire. Just as historians have a very narrow repertoire of what they can cover, and most things in the past are outside the repertoire of history. Most things that happen in the natural world are outside the repertoire of science. So you have to have a non-scientific basis because there's no science to support it.
So I actually, what I'm hoping to accomplish here is actually to debunk our current framework in science. So bear with me. I'm going to try to lay this out in a methodical, almost legal type of presentation. So modern science is approximately 500 years old. We have an anniversary coming up in 22 years. Now, 1543 is the date credited with the start of modern science, when books by Vesalius and Copernicus were written on human anatomy and the solar system, respectively. So modern science is 500 years old. Galileo is considered to be the father of modern science. The guy I think is the father of modern science, personally, Sir Francis Bacon, who borrowed natural philosophy from Aristotle and started the scientific method. And then through the Enlightenment and the Age of Reason and the rationalist doctrine, by the 1840s, two new introductions to science were added that changed it so radically that I personally think it deserves and actually requires a new name. They can't just keep calling it modern science because the new changes were so radical. And those two changes were scientific materialism, which you've alluded to, which is that matter is fundamental to existence. Right? I mean, that's what materialism is, and life emerged out of matter. That's the emergent property phenomena, or hypothesis, corollary, whatever it is. And the other thing that got it added in at the same time, and mind you, this is important. This is not coincidental. This is the zeitgeist. This is the philosophical energy of the time. This all happened in the 1840s at the same time that Marx and Engels were writing their book on Marxism. And that's not, these are closely related phenomena. The other thing that was added to science that you may or may not have known when you said, well, this is science, is something called hypothetico-deductivism. Francis Bacon was famous for inductive logic. He would see a pattern in nature and then come up with a hypothesis and say, well, this is what it is. And that has an inherent flaw to it because you can only observe so many things so many times, but that doesn't mean anything because it can be violated on the next iteration. So hypothetico-deductivism is based on the idea that you can never prove a hypothesis. All you can do, the best you can hope for, is to disprove a hypothesis, which makes sense. That's so all of science we have right now is based on that idea that you can never prove a hypothesis, you can only serve to disprove it. So the filter that any scientist did, and you probably just did it, or most scientists would do it, when I mentioned reincarnation, they automatically, it hits a tripwire. Can we falsify this? Can we test it for, can we create testable predictions? So those two things make up what I call postmodern science, which has nothing to do with postmodern rock or postmodernism. It's just a name for science from the 1840s onward. I argue that postmodern science is a form of institutionalized atheism.
Institutional what?
Atheism. Because it creates a firewall. I'm not saying that scientific materialism was a bad hypothesis at the time. it's very reasonable and rational and logical. Well, okay, there we have material and we have all this existence. It all came out of matter. Matter was first and then this. That wasn't an unreasonable hypothesis. What hypothetico-deductivism is a firewall that protects scientific materialism from even being challenged, because any other alternative hypothesis is on the other side of that firewall and it's automatically debunked. And of course,
what?
Of materialism,
Okay,
of the emergent. I would say more specifically the emergent property part of materialism, that life emerges from matter and that consciousness emerges from the brain, which is matter. Those are the two components that can't be tested. And because those, are you following what the logic is?
Hypothesis, yeah. But any theory of life is going to be a hypothesis.
Right, but we can't test a theory of life that is outside of hypothetico-deductivism.
Right. Well, if you've got some way you can come up with some kind of science that doesn't require testing but can be shown to be true, then I think people want to know about that.
So, in a form, in a kind of an odd way, you just brought up the world's oldest straw man, but it was it was so layered, nothing to do with you. But basically, you asked me to prove God, and I'm not going to. You basically asked me to prove God. I mean,
No,
sort of.
No.
Well.
No. I don't know how you jumped to that, but no, that's not what I'm doing.
Well, because I'm saying you can't separate God from life.
Well, you can say that.
Yeah.
but why would you think that?
So because okay, bear with me. I'll
I don't believe in God, but I believe in life.
I understand. I'm not. Let me. I understand that. Bear with me.
Okay. Go ahead.
Humor me.
All right, keep going.
Because I just made the mistake of actually debating that point of yours, wherein what I should have done is, no, you're right. We can't test that. What we can test is materialism. And if we test materialism and falsify materialism, we have to conclude that the proper model for life and consciousness is outside of hypothetico-deductivism. And if we do that, we actually debunk.
You have to conclude it's outside of materialism.
Well, let's go through the thought experiment and get.
Okay, but I'm not going to accept the premise. You're saying that if you can
no, I get you.
Okay, but so why would I accept that premise when it doesn't follow? I mean, I assume that even if you don't believe in materialism, you believe in logic.
So
if you don't believe in materialism,
no. Let me restate your point. I think I understand. What you're saying is okay, just because we've proved abiogenesis to be false, that life actually didn't emerge from matter because we happen to have this. Is this what you're saying? Just because we did,
I mean, I'm not granting that we've disproved it.
No. We hadn't even gotten there. You're saying, well, if you disprove that, that doesn't mean
it doesn't mean that you get rid of. It just means you've gotten rid of materialism as the explanation. It doesn't mean you've gotten rid of science.
No, we're not getting rid of science. No. We just have to. We have to abolish my conclusion. If it, I like what Sam Harris says when he does debates, which is that almost never do the two people debating actually change each other's minds, but the people watching will get something out of the conversation.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm hoping for here.
Yeah. No,
so let me.
But I'm not going to follow you down a path if you take a wrong turn. I'm sorry, and you need to explain why you're making a turn. If you're not you just can't build false premise on false premise. You got to. I mean,
wait, what wrong turn? I haven't taken it. What wrong turn did I take?
Okay, well, repeat what you said earlier when you said that if you were to disprove materialism, then what was your then?
I'm debating internally where I want to go here. Can I table that question?
Repeat what you said.
I understand. I only have an hour and 10 minutes left. I'm kind of joking. what I said was, if we debunk materialism, we have to conclude that the correct model, the correct paradigm for existence is outside of is on the other side of that firewall of hypothetical deductivism.
I don't understand the logic of that.
Okay, so that's why I wanted to table it, and let me continue, and then we'll.
Okay, because I mean, you could have hypothetical deductionism without materialism. It's just materialism is one.
Let me continue.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. Okay,
yeah,
go ahead.
let's have fun,
Okay.
because
I'm having fun. This is great. I haven't had a conversation like this in a long time.
yay, that's the whole point. Okay, so I want to challenge materialism.
Yeah.
Because science always says, well, prove God. And I'm like, no, you do your science on your own basic hypothesis. So that's what I want to do. So how are we going to do that? We can't even entertain the idea of creating whole new planets and conducting the experiment, because even if it did create life on its own, we still wouldn't know whether that was based on materialism or not. But what we can test, on the other hand, is, does the brain produce consciousness? Because they're both part of the emergent property hypothesis or corollary of materialism. And I wrote a paper on my website. By the way, anyone watching this, who cares? My website's beyondmefilms.com, or you can just go to DogsAndBaskets.com, and that has all these podcasts. But beyondmefilms.com has 4 documentaries that I made, and someone teased me 2 years ago, actually, to debate Sam Harris, and said that they shared the editor and the publisher, and that he had Sam's number on speed dial, and he had this all set up in Princeton. And I prepared for 6 months, and it never happened. Just leave it at that. But I had prepared my presentation for 6 months, so I sat in front of the camera and presented it. So there's a video on my site called Invite to Sam Harris, which is a lot of what I'm going to cover right here.
Okay.
And also on my website, there's a page that's called What is Life? And I wrote a paper that I submitted to Nature, The Lancet, New England Journal of Medicine, American Psychologists Association, all the top journals I could, which didn't, I have 10 testable predictions, none of which should be possible if the brain is producing consciousness. And those were the only things that weren't they weren't cited at all. In other words, the point of my paper wasn't to disprove materialism, it was to ask the question to the community. This is one of the biggest questions we have. Is it the right model? Can we agree that these are suitable, testable predictions? And the response was pretty predictable. But there's one response from I redacted his name in his paper's publication because it doesn't matter who it's from, but it's laced with derision and insults and claims of authority, and that basically I need to become an authority and spend the next 20 years becoming an expert in their ideology before I can publish in something that was outside of it. But that paper, it probably needs to be completely rewritten, but I think it's the basis for a decent paper on how we can agree as a community whether or not we can attempt to debunk materialism. So the idea is that if the brain's producing consciousness, so let me take a step back here, a little history lesson. Right up the 15501 from you, up just before you get to Duke, is the J.B. Rhine Institute. Are you familiar with them at all?
The
J.B. Rhine, R-H-I-N-E.
I don't think so.
No, it's a small thing. J.B. Rhine lived 100 years ago. So he's sort of credited in the modern era for being the first person to, if you've watched the original Ghostbusters and Bill Murray's holding up the cards with the lines, and those were developed by J.B. 100 years ago. Okay. Right. So he was trying to do controlled experiments, very crude because he wasn't a trained scientist, on how can we measure this? There's all these phenomena, some people might call them miracles or, healing or different things. Is there a way we can design properly controlled experiments to see if we can get any meaningful, statistically significant results? A Boeing engineer in the 1960s by the name of Helmut Schmidt started to create random number generators that you can connect to a computer. And the idea was he could take J.B. Ryan's squiggly lines on a card and automate it and hermetically seal it, like make it perfectly scientifically viable, and to see if test subjects could change the results of a random number generator with their minds alone. And he started to get significant results over many tests, many studies. And then up in Princeton at the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Laboratory, started by Robert John and Brenda Dunn in the 70s, is where we really started to see significant professional, you can say, scientific experimentation on any of these phenomena of mind over matter, telekinesis, clairvoyance, healing, a wide variety of these tests. And we're not getting, and they intentionally made these experiments designed such that it wasn't trying to bring in some psychic, they were designed to bring in anybody off the street. In fact, they tried to actually get their people who are the most disbelievers, if you will, to come in and, put on headsets. Some of the experiments were attaching galvanic skin responses and pulse and heart rate and respiratory, and putting pictures on the screen to see what kind of results they were getting. But what they were realizing is that the biometric responses they were getting from the test subjects were happening 4, 5, 6 seconds prior to the stimulus.
Yes.
Right. So you're aware of some of these.
Yeah.
There's a guy, Bill Bankston, up in New York, who's developed this protocol it's for healing, but he was getting these mice from Johnson Labs, and he had developed a protocol where he was healing them. He ended up getting fired from, I don't know if it was New York University. It was a big New York university. I don't know if it was actually New York or not. But he freaked everybody out because he was getting results. Like at that point when he conduct these experiments, no mice were living past 27 days or something like that. And not only was he curing all these mice, but he could take cultures out of the healed mice and inject them into metastatic cancerous mice and cure them. One of my favorite experiments in this whole array of things, and most of these I've itemized on this list of testable predictions. Can we agree that none of these things should be possible if the brain's producing consciousness? And one of my favorites is this guy, Dean Radin, had this brilliant idea. You're familiar with the double slit experiment, and if there's an observer, the particles are acting like particles, and if there's not an observer, it's behaving like a wave. So he created an isolation tube to put a miniature double slit experiment, and he had statistically significant results with people who are observing with their minds, if you will, at the slots and getting different results. But then he was getting a couple more orders of magnitude difference in trained meditators who were doing the same thing. So on the what do they call it in statistics? The control group, they weren't getting it. It was a 50-50 chance. All these experiments, or most of them, except for the healing, maybe even the healing, of course, they're all designed to be a coin flip result. So you're not getting, 90%, 10% for it's 54, 55, 56, but over thousands of studies, and if you're not trying to prove these phenomena, but on the other hand, actually just disprove materialism, they're more than interesting. And so Dean Radin's results from his his encased double slit experiment are fascinating. So I picked the best 10. There's, and I'm not a parapsychologist or anybody who's involved in these actual studies. I'm just someone who's compiled the paper. There's probably 20 or 30 different categories of phenomena that they're studying, or different tests that they're using to there's precognition and retrocausation, clairvoyance, telekinesis. So on one hand, I guess question number one is, are these 10 testable predictions that I've laid out, are those suitable? And I haven't itemized them, I haven't laid them out here. Like I don't have my spreadsheet or my PowerPoint presentation where I'm laying them out. They're there on my paper. I would think if only one or two of them, it would be interesting. But if you've got 10 and they're all showing, demonstrating conclusively to me that the human mind is operating beyond space and time, and science can't even explain how consciousness is being produced by the brain in the first place, that's not a very good case for the brain producing consciousness. And it seems to violate our current understanding of how the brain function works. And as far as the abiogenesis, we've known for 75 years that that the basic materials for life are lipids, self-replicating molecules, and amino acids are the building blocks for life. And we've never been able to produce life in a test tube. That doesn't bode well for that part of the equation. Like if we knew this is what it took for life, we can turn up the temperature, turn down, gravity, electricity, all the other variables that would have been there 3.5 years ago, and we still can't do it. That doesn't bode well for that theory. I would assert, if we had all this information in the study of human consciousness, and neither of I think if you added up the total amount that you and I knew about quantum mechanics, it would be enough to, it wouldn't even fill up a half of a piece of paper. However, if we look at as far as I know, and I don't mind being corrected, as far as I know, the three models, you can call them buckets because I think there's different hypotheses in each bucket, but there's three models for understanding the relationship between human consciousness and our existence. There's scientific, or just materialism, that the brain produces consciousness, and that's, of course, that's how we are understanding things. There's panpsychism, which is sort of it's a hybrid. Maybe I should just go to idealism. Idealism is the model that says that the entire universe is an epiphenomena, a byproduct of a consciousness that's beyond space and time. And then panpsychism is a hybrid between those two, that somehow consciousness is a universal phenomena like gravity or electricity or light or whatever, and interoperates with our nervous systems to give each one of us the qualia that we have, the unique taste and flavors and experiences. So those are I don't even care if I'm wrong. It'd be nice to talk about, but I think those are the three models, that the universe is an outcropping of consciousness comes from a brain, or consciousness is intrinsic to the universe. If we can agree that those tests debunk materialism, and that's just Frank talking, so I can't decide by myself, then we can debunk materialism. Panpsychism can be disqualified, because in order for panpsychism to be the correct model, because of the experiments that we've seen with all these experiments that are computer generated, random number generators and such, that would mean that computers have to have their own consciousness. So we can rule that out, although some people have a hard time following that. So by the process of elimination, we're left with idealism as the correct model for reality. And idealism, we can't create testable predictions out of it.
I'm happy to
So
respond.
Huh?
I'm happy to respond.
Oh, I'm okay. Good. This is a good time.
Okay. Look, I'm not an expert on consciousness. There are experts on consciousness. as you know, you probably read them all, but
No, well, no, because,
oh, well, I mean, no, there are people who spend their lives doing this who are both who know the science of the brain, who they're not neurologists per se, but
they're the ones who panned my paper.
well,
They're
okay.
materialists.
I'm
They're
everyone-
materialists, so I wouldn't call them expert. The people, I'll finish your point.
Can I just say
Huh?
that if you want to, if you want somebody to agree with you that modern science is ill-founded, then you can't ask scientists to evaluate your work, because everyone agrees that science is well-founded. And so if you want an alternative view, you've got. So let me just say.
Wait. Science is well-founded?
Yes. Did it put us on the moon, for example?
So no, but now you're using Sir Francis Bacon's inductive model of science to defend the deductive model. We can come up with a list of my 10.
What I'm saying, Frank, is that there are real experts. You want to talk about whether the brain can create consciousness or not. There are real experts who know a lot about the brain and about consciousness who've worked on this so I don't know. Do you know David Chalmers? I mean, oh my God. And Daniel Bennett. And I mean,
I'd rather talk. Well, neither was Irenaeus.
No, of course. And Irenaeus can be tested, and so can these views. And so, if you want to know about consciousness, you shouldn't be talking to Bart Ehrman. You should be talking.
Oh no, I'm not. No, I'm not. I'm talking to all the people.
And anybody's listening to this, I'm just telling you, if you want to know about consciousness, there's amazing literature out there by people who, and so that's my first thing. The second thing is, I don't think that, well, actually, that wasn't one of my first things. I've got three things. The fact that we can't create life in a laboratory is absolutely right. It doesn't, but what does it show us? For entire human history, until recently, humans would have loved to fly. And since, whatever, the 13th century, they've been trying. The fact that they didn't succeed for hundreds of years didn't mean it was impossible. And so if you kind of experiment and say, well, you can't create life, therefore it can't be materialistic, that's false reasoning.
Oh, I didn't say that, Bart. I was very careful. I was very careful with my words. I just said it's not a good look. That's all I said.
It's a neutral look. It doesn't weigh one or the other. I mean, for many hundreds of thousands of years, people had no idea how thunder happened. They tried to find out. And so the next thing is, when you say that something violates our current understanding of the brain function, so there are, look, I'm a New Testament scholar. I'm telling you, I've read neurology and neuroscience. And I'm telling you, there's no understanding of the brain function. My next door neighbor, she's retired. She dealt with mice brains for her 40-year career, and she said, we have no idea how this stuff works. And it's absolutely right. I mean, there's no way. I mean, you probably heard about this recent experiment that just tries to map the synaptic connections in a fruit fly. It's like, it's going to take 20 years even to figure out what the synaptic connections are. So like, to say that we have a theory of brain function, no, we don't have a theory of brain. So it's like our theories of consciousness do not contradict what we know about the brain. We don't. And so that's my final point, is that if you say that experiments can disprove materialism, no, they can show that our current understandings of materialism are problematic, but that doesn't mean that materialism is wrong. And so, yeah, so these are premises that you're building something on, but I don't agree with the premises. And I'm not a philosopher, and I'm not an expert in consciousness, although I read about it and I'm interested in it. But it's like, and forget neurology? No, I'm not a neurologist, but I'm just saying there are people who are, and if they disagree with you, there's probably a reason. So, I don't go into this area because it's like it's way over my head. But I'm so far.
Well, so let me respond. These are all fair. These are all fair points. And it's nice to be pushed up against the wall. I've rarely gotten pushed up against the wall like this in this context.
Well, you need to talk to more New Testament scholars.
It's actually part of the reason I'm doing it with you is because the scientists won't do this.
Well, no, but I mean, I'm not going to talk to a New Testament scholar who says
no.
who comes up with some theory that's like, yeah, actually, that's not so. All right.
There's a whole section I'm going to do after this.
Okay.
There's the science, the studies. There's been thousands of studies. No, how does it work? Hundreds, maybe thousands of controlled experiments, and then each one of those controlled experiments has had hundreds or thousands of test subjects. So there's a huge body of work. None of it ever gets published. The only thing that got published was Daryl Bem got something published on retrocausation in the American Psychologists Association thing once, but then it got completely ridiculed.
Well, usually when people ridicule things, they have reasons, and it's important to see what their logic and what their evidence is. So I don't think that often new advances do get ridiculed, but I think we have to weigh what the reasons are for the ridicule, and not simply say, well, they're not accepting something new now. The new now has to have some kind of basis for it, and so. If it may be that they're just, they're being protective, maybe they're just like jealous for their own lab or something, but usually they have, when they're experts, it's not that they've drunk the Kool-Aid, it's that they've seen it, they've seen how it works. And
it violates their ideology.
Look, this is increasingly evident that you have a very strong ideology.
I'm dying to hear it, but.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well.
That there's all these studies that scientific materialists, all of our journals are operating within the materialistic paradigm.
Because science works. That's what science does. It predicts things, and those things happen. And when it predicts things successfully, and then you can show when you come up with a hypothesis and then you demonstrate it, then you can go from there. So science works because there are a lot of hypotheses that are not borne out, and then you realize those are wrong. When
you're using the word work, so what can you qualify or quantify?
You figure out how to make a jet plane. You figure out how to jet.
So
how aerodynamics works, and then you build something to make it happen. And by God, that thing went off the ground. And it went off the ground for 20 seconds, but you realize you're onto something here. You had the science in your head, you made something to verify it, and it verified it. And then, before you know it, you're landing on the moon. And so I'm just saying that there are science is a way of coming up with a hypothesis and then test. You're talking to a guy who's not a scientist. I mean, I'm just saying this is like how science works.
I'm saying it doesn't work.
Okay, well then don't go to the dentist when your tooth hurts.
No, let me finish. Let me make the point. Because obviously I said something very provocative and outlandish. Let me explain what I'm saying. So every example I've heard, maybe not, but I don't want you to jump, go down a rabbit hole, a rat hole on some mistake I made. Look, you go back 100 years. Right, 1921. And from there to today, and you look at the jet airplanes landing on the moon, this phone call on Zoom, that's just incredible. All this science and technology that has developed over that, it's astonishing. I mean, it's remarkable. I mean, my father 100 years ago didn't have a refrigerator, and look at where we're at today.
I would be an idiot to argue against that. But again, I would say, well, that's Francis Bacon's inductive logic. But I like to look at health and healing and wellness on 5 levels: our physical health, our emotional health, our social health, our mental health, mental, social, spiritual, emotional, and physical. What, you know, whether or not there's spirit, what is and isn't spirit, but
yeah.
And we can look at health and well-being on each one of those levels. And so right now on the planet, we have epidemics of obesity, cancer, autism, type 2 diabetes, depression, school shootings, on and on and on the list goes. I mean, we're not well. You can say life expectancy is longer, infant mortality is high or lower. Those are some of the arguments I've typically had, but if we just look at health and well-being, not that it matters, it's a scientifically low sample size, but almost everybody I ask the question to says, no, not only are we nowhere, we're not healthier than we were 100 years ago, we're less healthy on all 5 of those levels. I know that's, you can, like, someone can pick that apart, but again, we can use common sense. If we had 10% the trajectory that we've had in science, technology, and our health and well-being over the last 100 years, we'd be superhumans. So that's the context where I'm saying, well, this model of science doesn't really work.
What's your when you're trying to figure out, look, the world is messed up and most people are completely messed up. So I'm not going to argue about that. I don't think it's true that we're less physically healthy than we were, because things are really bad now with all the things you listed, but you need to compare it with what it was like, say, in 1721. And
I said 1921.
Even 1921. I mean, I'm telling you, the comparison, there's no comparison. If you had a tooth abscess in 1921, you were screwed. If you had, I mean, I'm just telling, so in terms of physical health, there is no debate that we are physically more healthy than people in 1921. There's no debate about that. There shouldn't be a debate about that. Most people were, I mean, so they didn't have modern medicine. I'm just telling you. And modern medicine is, there are huge problems. But I think the big problem is that people in Western cultures think that because we have such advances in modern medicine, that we are all around healthier. And it's led to huge emotional and psychological problems. I completely agree with that. And social problems and culture, I agree with all that. But it's not because of materialism. It's because the science itself works. I mean, they can transplant a heart. They couldn't do that in 1921. And so the physical side is fine, but the problem is people have neglected the other sides. And so, I mean, you remember Sam Harris, he's a good example. I mean, he's a complete scientist. He is a hardcore scientist.
He's not a scientist. He's a neurologist, but he's an author. He took some ecstasy, went to India for.
You don't think a neurologist is a scientist?
He's got a degree. Sam Harris took ecstasy.
What do you think he is if he's not a scientist?
He's an author and a podcast host.
Yes, so am I. Doesn't mean I'm not a New Testament scholar. What do you mean he's not a scientist? A neurologist is a kind of scientist.
Well, I'm a scientist too.
Science, but he's a scientist.
I wouldn't call him a hardcore scientist. I don't see him as someone who's doing controlled experiments, who's got a lab at Stanford, who spends his whole life doing.
I didn't say that.
That's what that you said. A hardcore scientist.
No.
Anyway, look.
I said he was a scientist, and you said no, he's not. You
said he's a hardcore. Anyway, look, I don't want to. I don't.
This. So he's hardcore. What I mean by hardcore is I don't mean that he's got a lab where he's advancing knowledge. I mean that he is a complete materialist.
I know that, absolutely.
But he's also very big on meditation.
I know that.
Yes. So all I'm saying is that there are people who are hardcore scientists in the sense they're real materialists who believe in materialist results by doing materialist experiments, but they recognize that that's not all of life. And that's the problem, is people have become so scientific that they've eliminated other aspects of human existence.
I agree with you that materialism isn't the problem per se, although I would say that if we had all the information we had on quantum mechanics and modern physics and all the results from all the controlled experiments into human consciousness 180 years ago, materialism would have never seen the light of day.
I completely disagree. People recognized the materiality of existence long before 1843. They were doing material experiments that showed them that empiricism was a superior form of scientific inquiry, and that the problem was that the earlier generations agreed that it's not all material, and it completely screwed up their understanding of the world. I think one of the issues is how you're going to use how you're going to demonstrate that materialism isn't true without doing materialistic experiments.
The hypothesis was to debunk it using the experiments that I said, which have all been designed and as controlled experiments, have been conducted for decades, and the results are
I just think it
conclusive.
means you don't know materialism well enough. Look, I mean, nobody knows how the brain works.
Yeah.
So you can't say that it's not materialist because we don't know, we're not advancing it. There's no theory. I mean, there are theories, lots of theories.
My main problem really wasn't materialism per se, although I think it's wrong.
Yeah.
It's the hypothetico-deductivism, which has created a it's a substrate underneath the society that is a form of institutionalized atheism. That to me is the problem.
Well, I don't know, because I know a lot of scientists who believe in hypothetical deductionism and are complete materialists, but they're thoroughly Christian.
I understand that. That doesn't.
So it doesn't. It's not institutional atheism, because a lot of people involved in the institution are not atheists.
I'm talking about things like our academics, grade school, our hospitals, our agriculture. Our entire system is based on, well, you do believe this, you believe in science, don't you? You believe in science. Anytime someone has to ask you believe in science, it's no longer science, it's an ideology. All of our entire society, except for churches, sits on top of a philosophical ideology that negates God. And you think that's a good thing?
Oh, no, you're wrong about that.
Which part?
It does not negate God.
So hypothetico-deductivism does.
It does not.
You're right. No, you're correct. I stand corrected. But the way it has penetrated our society has created a sense of godlessness. How about, is that a better way of saying it?
No, I'm sorry, I don't agree. I know hundreds of people, thousands of people believe in. I mean, hypothetical deductionism is how science is done. It's got nothing to do with whether God exists.
Yeah, but it doesn't.
Even people who believe in God think that God set the world to work in certain ways. And the way you know how it works is the hypothetical deductionism. It has nothing to do with whether God exists or not. I'm telling you, I mean, you've got some kind of anti-materialist ideology. I don't understand where it's coming from. Because you don't deny God. I mean, you don't have to deny God to believe. I mean,
I'm not saying that. I'm saying our society in general. The unintended consequences of the Nicene Creed, as you've pointed out, is that there's all this, systemic bigotry. There's this lack of tolerance for people who think differently. And I'm also saying
we have to listen to people who disagree with us, but we
understand
have to see whether we have reasons to agree with them or not. And to say that, it's because it's institutional atheism. I mean, that just sounds like far right talk. Like, oh my God, you must be one of those goddamn atheists. It's like, what? It's like,
I didn't say that.
but you said that it's institutional atheism to engage in hypothetical deductionism.
No, I didn't say that. I didn't say, no, if that's what you heard, let me correct that.
You said it was built on, it was constructing ideological, it was built on institutional atheism. Right? Did I miss?
We're a little bit disconnected here. I'm saying is an unintended consequence of
not.
Let me move on, because I want to come full circle here.
Okay. So, but I'm just saying, there.
If I put together this list of 10 testable predictions, and I say these show conclusively that human consciousness operates beyond space and time, and the materialist response to that is, well, we don't know that the brain can actually produce a phenomena that operates beyond space and time. So therefore, your tests don't mean anything to us. Yeah. Then we're not going to get anywhere. This is an important question.
Well, but if you come up with 10 tests they don't agree with, then of course they're not going to think you're.
No, I didn't say that they agree. The tests are there. They're going they're going to shoehorn into their theory that they can't even prove. They can't even explain how it produces this phenomena that lets me see this light bulb. And then they're going to shoehorn this idea that that phenomena can operate beyond space and time. And there's no science for that. It's just an explanation.
Let me just say there are people who work on this who know all about it, and I don't. But go ahead, go with your conclusion. Continue.
Right. I wish that could have gone better, but at least I got.
No, it's fine. Look, Frank, you just can't expect everybody to agree. You want
to
have drinks at the Armadillo Grill. We're having drinks at the Armadillo Grill here.
I understand, but you're telling me to go drink at the altar of Irenaeus. Like you don't understand what you're. Yes,
that's the opposite of what I'm saying. Irenaeus agrees with you. He's an anti-materialist.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying he's the powerful gatekeeper who's going to control the ideology. Of course, I'm talking about Daniel Dennett or Richard Dawkins or any of these guys, all the people who rejected my paper, who are sitting there and they've got all the power of Irenaeus, and they're sitting back saying, this is heresy, get this out of here. That's my point.
Irenaeus had no evidence behind his views.
And where's Chalmers' evidence that the brain produces consciousness? There isn't any.
That isn't Chalmers' view. So I'm just saying that, because you disagree with a very powerful institution, doesn't mean that you're being oppressed.
Okay, but let's move on. I got more I want to talk about.
Keep going. Yeah, keep going.
So part of what I did there was a meta-analysis across this and trying to say, look, we've got these 3 different cases for the understanding the relationship between our consciousness and our external reality, which is in one way or another, you can say the basis for all religions. Maybe misunderstood or misinterpreted, but at the end of the day.
What's the basis for all religions? You lost me a little bit there.
Yeah, what I said was that the relationship that I had done this meta-analysis on materialism and hypothetical effectivism based on the 3 different models for our relationship between our, what is this physical world and what is our, what's our relationship of our consciousness in that world. So my follow-on is, can we then do a meta-analysis across the teachings of Buddha, Jesus, Socrates, Krishna. Those are the well-known ones, but there's dozens more. There's, in the last 150 years, there's, Brahmananda Saraswati and Paramahamsa Yogananda and Vivekananda and Ram Krishna. So there's a lot of
spiritual teachers who've been trying to tell us something.
Mhm.
Jesus was trying to tell us something.
Mhm.
Socrates was trying to tell us something.
Yep.
And so can we apply the scientific process and do a meta-analysis and try to figure out, contextualize and maybe understand. We're trying to put together a jigsaw puzzle of Jesus Christ or Jesus of Nazareth, and we're missing 90% of the puzzle pieces.
Okay.
Right? I mean, there's that, or you might say 99 pieces, but we're trying to understand what we don't have anything close to the original documents, the original manuscripts. We have stuff that's decades old, and there's all these mistakes. And then we know there's the editorial bias of the proto-Orthodox teachers. We contextualize what Jesus said and by trying to make some scientific a priori presuppositions that some or all of them are trying to teach the same thing, whatever they're trying to tell us. Socrates said, "Know te seotan," know thyself, become self-realized. Buddha, and you have something in common with Buddha. Did anyone ever tell you that?
My belly?
No. Your life and Buddha's life they were parallel lives.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
In fact, this is like my answer to your question. Your question. What, come on, God, what the fuck? What about all the suffering? The answer is, my answer would be, what Buddha would tell you, right?
Yeah.
Go sit under that tree, close your eyes and observe your sensations. Like, get out of your head. That's so Buddha called the birth, life, rebirth, life cycle, samsara, the disease of samsara, the disease of samsara, and the cure for that was enlightenment, moksha, liberation. Krishna talked about attaining nirvana. In Islam, Muhammad talked about attaining the station of Abraham. And of course, Jesus talked about atonement, which out of context doesn't sound like any of those, but if you understand all of them, atonement is a perfect description for whatever enlightenment is. And I also happen to think that a obvious interpretation of Plato's allegory of the cave is that he's talking about enlightenment, and that for me, the shackles that hold people hooked, connected to the bench of the cave are made out of ideologies. Like, in order to leave the cave, you have to drop all your belief systems, because your beliefs are the things that are oppressing you, not anything else. And so from that context, and of course, what the hell is enlightenment? We can look at all these different teachings. A good friend of mine, Lene, asked me a couple of years ago, she wants to know about the historical Jesus. And by the way, I think that on one hand, this kind of a meta-analysis sort of can make Jesus sort of irrelevant, because if you can build a paradigm with or without him, that's the same paradigm.
Yeah.
It works, but it actually validates his historicity, because if you can interpret it in a way that fits, you'd have to see it through that lens of, like, we can't really know what enlightenment is. We kind of can guess and assume what it is. It does tie back in with my the assertion that I'm making, that idealism, that there's a consciousness that's behind all of this apparent reality has something to do with an enlightened being, and that enlightenment apparently means becoming one with all of that. And so what do you think of that? I mean, you wrote down some notes. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I think I would agree that all of these figures were interested in enlightenment in some sense, and that they recognize that the human condition is that it's unenlightened. I think that, and you could add a lot more. I mean, within the Christian tradition, obviously, Gnosticism, the whole thing is about learning the secret knowledge that can, recognize who you really
Well,
are.
that's where I'm getting at, because can you do a 5-minute explanation to people, explain Gnosticism?
Gnosticism. So Gnosticism, right. So there was
I know it's a favorite subject of yours.
well, no, I do like it. So I'll do a quick one. There were a group of religions in antiquity that are best known because they have close relationships with Christianity, and sometimes they're considered a form of Christianity. It's called Gnosticism. Gnosticism comes from the Greek word gnosis, which means knowledge. And these religions were very different from one another. So that's like, just like Christianity has all these differences, Gnosticism had all these differences, but they tended to agree that the way to salvation was by acquiring secret knowledge. And the knowledge wasn't available to everyone, but the knowledge really involved a kind of a self-knowledge of who you really were on the inside, and where you came from and how you got here. And so
And how to get back.
And how to get back, yeah. So, and in some systems, it's actually by knowing, actually the knowing itself is what gets you back. But Jesus has figures into a lot of these systems where he's the one who reveals the secret knowledge you need for salvation, to escape the trappings of your body, because you're not just a physical being. So this would fit in well with a lot of what you're saying about the brain and the consciousness, because they think that there's a core within you, that there's a being within you that needs to be liberated from its physical character, and that the liberation is what brings you salvation, because then you return to your heavenly home, which is a spiritual existence, not a physical existence. This understanding of things largely appears to have come from Platonic thought. So Plato is the one, he didn't invent the idea of the spirit existing separately from the body, but he popularized that view. And so that's where the idea that you've got something inside of you apart from your matter is what really is significant. And in the Gnostic systems, then it needs to be set free. And like the Platonic system, the problem is that the body, people cave into their bodily desires, and it keeps the spirit entrapped, because the spirit likes that because it's pleasurable. But the issue is to escape the body, not to be entrapped in it. And so this knowledge of who you really are can set you free from the entrapment. So the system about the brain and consciousness, that's a Platonic thought. That's a Platonic idea.
Well, it's a Vedantic idea, which predates Plato by thousands of years. But
Plato didn't get it from there. The guy came into the West.
No, that's correct. Yeah, neither did I. So there's a couple things in there, and you left off the second half of that, which is a bunch of crazy stories that I was hoping you would leave off. I don't want to, because they're
not crazy. They're myths, and most myths are crazy.
Yeah, well, but they're out there. So there's a few tweaks. Every time I hear someone say it like you did, I'm like, well, wait, that's not like you're panning for gold, and you got these huge nuggets of gold, like an 8-ounce nugget and a 10-ounce nugget, and you're just tossing those aside, grasping on to the stones you think you evolved from. It's not that you receive the secret knowledge. And by the way, everyone gets a diagnosis or a prognosis, so we all know what the word gnosis means. It means knowing. But the idea that, like, if Jesus gave, I just think that needs to be removed, that Jesus gave someone some secret knowledge. No, the secret knowledge is on the other side of the door in Plato's cave. You get the knowledge. Knowledge is only gained, like, I can't give you knowledge. Knowledge is only gained through experience. This is what Socrates said. So Gnosticism, in fact, I would argue, and you could call this ideological, but I would argue that Gnosticism is a scientific discipline. The hypothesis is enlightenment, and the techniques and methodology of running your experiment to see whether or not you're going to vet. I think it's a testable hypothesis. And I know I just hit a bunch of tripwires with scientists who were saying, how?
Plato thought it was testable too. I mean, Plato thought that his dialogue, the Meno, M-E-N-O, is about how you can demonstrate that you have knowledge prior to your bodily existence. He brings in a slave and he gives him some geometrical issues, and he asks the slave to kind of solve geometrical problems, and he can figure it out. The slave figures it out, and Plato says, well, he's never studied geometry, so how does he know it? And his conclusion was, well, he knew it before he was born. And so it's
that's okay.
so this is your reincarnation idea. I mean,
No, well, right, but that might be, but that's not. So what a scientist, let me circle around. What a scientist would say to me when I say enlightenment, exiting the cave, Plato's cave, and then come stumbling back down the stairs. I mean, I would say Plato predicted or forecast the crucifixion of Christ for 300-400 years before it happened, because when someone exits the cave and comes back in, they get attacked, and the inmates who are, nailed to the bench want to kill the guy. What I'm talking about, the high testable hypothesis, isn't reincarnation. I mean, he's doing my controlled experiments on human consciousness, reincarnation, and I mean, murders have been solved with little kids who've been reincarnated and have enough information to go back and help the police find.
Yeah, whatever.
I didn't even want to go there. I'm talking about enlightenment.
I know,
but what?
You can't base a scientific theory on anecdotal evidence.
I'm not.
Yes, you are. You just said kids have solved mysteries.
Did I present that as a scientific argument?
No, but you're trying to argue against materialism.
Okay, so I'm going to leave out anecdotal stories. I'm sorry to pollute the waters with.
Don't prove reincarnation by kids who solved murder mysteries. That's not going to get you very far.
I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm saying it's interesting. Ian Stevenson
great anecdotes. I can tell you all sorts of anecdotes that are interesting.
I know you've had.
They happen.
Let's get back into the cave. Actually, I want to get out of the cave.
Yeah, please do. I'm hoping you do. See the light, please.
Bart, Jesus was a Gnostic. He was an enlightened master.
No, I wasn't.
He absolutely was.
All right.
He was a Gnostic. He was an enlightened master, just like Socrates was a Gnostic, Buddha was a Gnostic, Krishna was a Gnostic. What's that?
How do you show it? Now you're asking a historical question.
No, I'm saying if I'm hold on. If I exited the cave tonight and I became enlightened, your question would be the same thing. You would be, Frank, show it. And I would say, show it to whom?
No, it's different, because that is
that's the same question. I couldn't show you that I was enlightened. It's impossible. Who am I going to show it to? I'm there's no one to share that knowledge of being enlightened with, because
that is categorically different from making a statement about a historical figure. To know about a person in the past, you have to have historical evidence. You can't simply say something about them and say, yeah, well, there's no evidence for it, but that's true. You
say that Jesus didn't believe in life after death because first century Jewish rabbis didn't believe in life after death.
That's not the only reason I said that.
Oh, that's all I heard. I'm sorry, I didn't heard
my book then, because in fact I have a lengthy discussion about why Jesus probably didn't believe in life after death. He did believe in life after death, by the way. He believed in life after death in a resurrected body. He did not believe that the spirit could be separated from the body. And that can be shown. It's a historical claim. Any historical claim about Jesus or any other historical figure has to have evidence behind it. It can't just be what seems to be right to you. I mean, if it did, then,
Okay, I'll strike that, Your Honor. I would say it like this. I would say, what's the proper linguistics here? I would say that part of my hypothesis that I've generated, this is a better way of saying it, that we can do this meta-analysis across all these masters, and that all of them, including Jesus, were enlightened masters, and that this is a testable hypothesis.
How do you test it?
By exiting the fucking cave. Get off the bench, take off your shackles of ideologies and leave the cave.
Wait a second. Testable hypotheses usually means it's an experiment that can be repeated.
Yeah, that's the whole point. That's what Jesus said. Everybody can do it. This whole idea that Gnosticism is only available to a few people, it's available to everybody. Everybody can repeat the experiment.
Really?
Yeah, of course. Everybody, Buddha has said that 10,000 people became enlightened with Buddha.
Okay.
That's what they've all said. Those were Socrates' instructions. Noti seota, know yourself. That's what Krishna said. They've all given us the same instructions.
So the meta experiment, the problem with kind of a meta-analysis of religious teachers is, so there have been scholars of religious studies who have argued that, at heart, all of these people are basically saying the same thing, and that religions at heart are basically the same thing. So this was a major view that was advanced, for example, by a fellow named Eliade, who was a professor at University of Chicago in mid-20th century, brilliant man. And it was popularized by Joseph Campbell. So a lot of your older listeners would love Joseph Campbell. And
how are you spelling Eliade? Sorry.
Eliade. He was a prominent historian of religion of an older era. And Joseph Campbell popularized these views by saying that basically, there's one religion, and there's basically one religion, and the religions that actually exist are all just kind of model, they're versions of that one religion. Today, there are scholars who actually study religion today, of which there are many, many thousands. Almost nobody thinks that anymore.
I know some of them up here in Boone, and I know a lot of people in religious studies universities. A lot of the ones I've met, most of them are atheists. So it seems kind of funny that atheists consider themselves experts on religions. I mean, they're looking at it from an atheistic viewpoint.
Well, you're looking at it from a viewpoint.
A scientific viewpoint. I said Gnosticism is a scientific discipline.
You said that.
Yeah.
What's your evidence of it?
Scientific evidence. It's a hypothesis.
A scientific viewpoint.
It's a
viewpoint. A mathematical viewpoint is one that can be demonstrated mathematically. The square root of 9 is 3. That can be demonstrated mathematically. A scientific viewpoint is one that can be demonstrated scientifically. So when you say that Gnosticism is a science,
I said it's a scientific discipline.
What does it even mean? Well, it's scientific discipline. The word science comes from the Latin word scientia, which means knowledge.
Yes, true.
So,
so we're back to gnosis.
So yeah, okay, that's fair enough. But usually when you say that, people think you mean something else, and so I'm not sure what you mean. That's a science.
I mean that the idea that all of our great teachers and thousands of lesser teachers have all said the same thing, which
they
is
have
that
not said the same thing. That's my point. They've all believed in enlightenment, but the way to enlightenment is very different. Socrates and Jesus did not agree. I mean, I'm telling you, you could say that without reading their stuff.
Which version? Mark, John, Luke, or John, Paul, Ringo, or George? Where are you
getting Jesus? Where are you getting your information about Jesus from? If you don't have historical sources, you don't have historical information. I've been studying Plato and Jesus for over 40 years. And I'm telling you, they do not represent the same view. Oh boy, do they not represent the same view.
And in the Vedic,
Krishna.
Chris. So in the Vedic tradition with Krishna, there's 4 main ways to there's Gyan Yoga, which is Socrates, which is just using your intellect. There's Raja Yoga, which is practical yoga, meditation. There's Karma Yoga, just working your way. And then there's devotion, which is Bhakti Yoga, Shakti Yoga, one of those. So even in the Veda tradition, they're saying, yeah, there's different ways of getting there. There's not just one way to exit the cave.
That's not what Jesus said. And it's not what Plato said. And Jesus, a 5th century Athenian or 4th century Athenian philosopher in the dualistic tradition was not saying the same thing that a first century apocalyptic Jew was saying. They're just not.
So how is that to be solved? In other words, there's
not an
no,
absolute truth out there, Frank. That's the problem. There's not
a what?
There's not an absolute truth. It's not that Jesus and Socrates both saw the truth and then said it. They had different views.
They couldn't possibly see the truth.
Either can you.
Right. Sight has nothing to do with the truth. The truth is an experiential thing that represents an existential threat to the ego. The egos don't want to find the truth, but the truth is there's only one truth.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't agree with that.
I like this definition of truth. The truth is that which never changes. Anything that changes isn't real.
Okay, tell me something that hasn't changed.
So there's a part of you. You just saw someone you went to high school with, and you haven't seen this person in 20 years, right? I mean, everyone's experienced this. And you see them, you're like, holy fuck, the wheels have fallen off that one, and you're seeing all the changes on that other person. And meanwhile, they're thinking the same thing about you. Look at all the hair he's lost, da, 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 da. The part of you that is observing the difference in the other person is a part of you that's never changed.
What part? Tell me something that has never changed. Just name something that has never changed.
I just explained to you a part of you that's never
no,
changed. Do you want me to name it?
How about 20 years later? How about in 100 years when they see me?
If you see if you're still alive, that observer
I
in
won't
you,
be alive. I'll be dead then.
Then you're missing my point.
When they look at me, what do they see that's the same?
No, I'm talking about you and you being the observer.
Okay, when
From
I
the
look
viewpoint
at them, suppose I look at them in 200 years, what do I see in them that's the same? So
it's nothing. It's not.
You need another example.
No, that's not them. It's you.
Thing that never changes. Truth.
Yeah.
The only thing that's true is something that never changes. Tell me what that is.
I'm saying that you can experience for yourself. I'm not going to tell you what it is any more than I'm going to tell you what's outside the fucking cave.
Because you can't name a single thing. Everything changes. Everything changes.
Not everything. There's a part of you when you see someone
that doesn't change.
I'm not going to put a name to it.
Because you don't have a name to it. There is nothing that does not change. This is basic Greek philosophy to begin with. You talk about Plato. Oh my God. The pre-Socratics, the whole thing is everything changes. And science proves that everything changes. So if you got something that doesn't change, I'd like to know what it is.
In my example, I mean, everybody watching this knows what I'm talking about. You're
You're talking about 20 years later, it hasn't changed.
I'm talking about the experience everybody has when they haven't seen someone in some time.
Yeah.
And you look right. And we see
you're talking about something that never changes. That means over the course of the last thousands of years, it hasn't changed.
I'm talking about beyond space and time. It hasn't changed. It's never changed, ever.
So name me something. Give me just one example. What over space and time, outside of space and time, has never changed?
You're not even trying.
I'm just asking for an example.
And I'm giving you one.
Okay, give it to me.
When you see someone that let me say this, because you're either being belligerent or just obstinate or obtuse.
I'm pointing out you're talking about for all time something hasn't changed, and your example is something for about 20 years.
And I'm saying it's the same thing.
You're saying 20 years is the same as eternity.
No, I'm saying that part of you that never changes was there. It's the Alpha and the Omega. It was never born. It'll never die.
It was there 20 years ago. Yes, I got that part. You said it never changes.
Right.
It's
In
never been
500
born.
years,
It'll
it
never
won't be there
die.
Look, it won't be there in 500 years, Frank.
That's your opinion.
Right. In other words, you don't have an example.
I'm giving you an example.
You're
And
giving me an example about a 20-year period.
It could be 2-week period. It doesn't matter how long it was.
How about 2 millennia?
If you're going to sit here and deny that there's a part of you that never changes, then you're not even making an effort.
No, I'm making an effort because I'm telling you, there is nothing in me that will be constant for all eternity. Nothing.
In fact, yes,
when
no
I die,
thing. It's
my
actually
body's going to deteriorate. My molecules are going to go back into the system. My spirit will not exist. There will be
that's
nothing.
your opinion. That's an opinion.
What's your opinion? You don't think you have an opinion. You think
I'm
I have
saying-
an ideology and you don't have an opinion. And yet you don't.
You're
don't
telling
have
me
the ability to even name an example.
an example. You're not.
You said me, and I just explained to you why.
I didn't say. I didn't. I didn't say
look
you.
inside yourself.
I didn't even say that. I said there's a part of you. I never said look inside you.
What part of me? What part of me is going to be existing in 1,000 years?
That's a good question. I would just stay with that question, Bart, and think about it. Maybe you'll get an answer. And maybe you'll understand why
Well,
there's
when you come
suffering.
up with
Maybe
an
you'll
answer-
understand why there's suffering in the world.
If you come up with an answer, what part of me is going to be around, say, in 100,000 years, I think you can let all of us know what that's going to be. Because I'm telling you right now, there's nothing. What's going to be around for me are the molecules in 100,000 years.
And you're talking
eventually-
exactly. You're talking.
Eventually, entropy is going to take care of the molecules. In about 20 trillion years, the molecules will be falling apart. And so, there's not going to be any part of me that's still the same. And the fact that I can recognize somebody from high school is not really what you're talking about.
I didn't say recognize. I said there's a part of you. There's a part of every person watching this who can identify with the experience of seeing a massive change in that. And the part of you that is observing that change is a part that never changes. And you want me to put a name on it?
Die, Frank.
It does.
If you think it doesn't, then give me some evidence. So take your great grandfather and tell me what he's thinking right now that seems the same.
Is it too much of a stretch to say that life is energy?
That life is energy?
Yeah, whatever life is. I mean, we don't know what gravity is. We don't know what electricity is. We don't know what magnetism is.
Well,
we know what life is, but is it fair to say that life is a form of energy, just like magnetism is energy? Or
I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know. I mean, energy is just a form of matter.
Yeah, but physics tells us we can never create or destroy energy. I don't understand what's such a shocking thing to understand that life is energy and you can never create or destroy energy, and life has always been there. Life predates the universe. Why is that such a bizarre?
Frank, you're welcome to think that. People thought that, for other people think that. That's fine. I mean, I don't know what reason you have to think it, but it's fine if you want to think it. But I don't see any reason I should think it. Reasons usually involve either logic or argument. If you don't have a reason, it's fine. You think anything you want without reason. I mean, I think I was a kangaroo 20,000 years ago. Why not?
I think that reason only gets you so far. In order to get to the ultimate truth, you have to go beyond reason.
Okay, fine. But if you can't use your reason, fine. If you've got something else to suggest besides reason, that'd be good. Except you're trying to make an argument.
I'm saying, yeah, beyond reason is experience.
Yeah, I don't think so. Look, Frank, we've gone over our time. I need to go.
All right.
Look, Frank, I'm happy with you to think anything you want about any of these big questions. They're big questions, and nobody has answers. But I really don't think it's a good idea to throw out reason as a way to figure out what's true, because if you throw out reason, then it opens up doors to all sorts of very, very, very harmful things that have Led to millions.
God, I wish you would have said that an hour ago. That's
sure
no
you
reason
did.
not to do it. There's no reason not to do it because it's going to
Throw
open
out
up
your
doors.
reason. Let me
Huh?
tell Frank, throwing out, you should, if you throw out your
No,
reason.
that it's going. Oh, what's going to happen to society? We're going to have people doing. You sound like Irenaeus. We can't get rid of these, and people are all the lunatics are going to take over.
Frank, if you throw out your reason, you need to put something in its place. And it
Experience. Exit. You have to get
Frank,
up off.
people talk about experience for thousands of years as the way of knowledge. I get that.
And so you have to, at the end of the day, you need to take the shackles off and exit the cave. There's no reason. That's beyond, get off your reason.
Are you talking about Plato here? And you think
Absolutely.
reason is the way to understand Plato? Read the Republic. Read it. Don't just read, book 6 or book 10. Read the Republic if you want to know about reason and its value. So you really cannot use Plato to say throw out your reason and go with your experience, because it's just the opposite of what he says.
I'm saying take off your shackles, get off the bench, and leave the cave.
All right, Frank. Let me suggest you take off your shackles and return.
What shackles? Tell me what. You still haven't told me what my ideology is.
Frank, it's not going to be any point in my telling you because you don't see it, and you're not going to see it.
It's funny because Irenaeus said not arguing with Gnostics was a waste of time too. And I think that's a good way to.
Gnostics was a waste of time, not arguing.
Huh?
He said arguing with Gnostics was a waste of time.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
Well, that's why
that you and him are on the same page.
Your view is you can't reason with you because reason doesn't matter.
I didn't say that.
I said your reason and experience.
I said
I'm not going to throw out my reason, and I'm telling you that it's a bad idea to throw out your reason. And you cannot appeal to Plato for throwing out your reason. You just can't.
Bart, listen, it's been a lot of fun. Another night at the Armadillo Lodge.
Armadillo Grill. Okay. Drink some more beer. Okay, Frank. Thanks. Look,
thanks.
Very stimulating. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time. All right.
Okay.
Bye.
All right. See ya.